that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 375th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey, that is me, and the amazing Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
In the flesh, that is him. And this particular show we are recording on the 11th of June, 2020. And, of course, we start with news of a week ago, so we're starting with June 4th. Every day I get up and go straight to the Internet and find out everything I can about news relating to energy and climate change and a few other things related to those. And I put those news items together, each with a synopsis and a link to the original, some of them, about half of them, with pictures. Package them up in a post and put the post online at a website called geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com. And you can follow this particular broadcast of Energy Week by going to that, or there are various other ways to do it that you can find wherever this is posted. There's a script that Tom and I follow, and you can follow along with that. And that having been said, Tom is going to tell us all about how everything is interesting to read. Right, Tom?
Something like that.
Have you got more to say on the subject?
Well, we can start right off with this bus. I guess we got a picture of a bus up here.
We do. This is a Proterra bus. It was made in the United States.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what the article says is Halifax aims to add 210 electric buses in the next 8 years. And what they're talking about, Halifax here, is Nova Scotia, which is pretty close to us, actually.
It is, and it's actually, I think, a bigger city than most people around here might realize. There's over 400,000 people who live in Halifax, so it kind of makes sense that they'd have over 200 buses. But let me read this synopsis. This comes from CleanTechnica. The Halifax Regional Municipality in Canada is getting more serious about climate change and stopping air pollution. Halifax has plans to put $780 million into getting the 210 electric buses onto the road and 3 new ferry routes into service by 2028, according to the Chronicle Herald. Now, that means they're doing this over a period of 8 years, so they're not just dumping $780 million into the... And, you know, I should also mention, I don't know if that $780 million is American or Canadian.
Yeah, there's a little slight difference between them.
Yeah, slight difference. Canadian, I think, is like, what is it? Do you know, Tom?
It's roughly 10%, but...
I think it's more than that. I think it's like...
It changes from time to time. So.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of hard to follow. But, you know, the interesting thing here is that they're doing this. They've got a reason to buy electric buses.
Well, from the article, this gives you the reason right away. Electric buses provide $24,000 a year in savings in energy and maintenance costs. There
you go.
And the long-term plan is a full electrification of the fleet, which makes a lot of sense, really.
Now, you said $24,000 a year.
That's what it's savings in energy and maintenance costs.
Right. These electric buses cost significantly more than diesel or gasoline-powered buses, but they save so much money that the difference...
practically maintenance-free.
Yeah, the difference is paid back in 4 or 5 years. So people who live in the United States don't realize this, but the majority of buses manufactured worldwide are electric. And the overwhelming majority of those electric buses are manufactured in China, 98% I've read, which I regard as kind of a gift to the Chinese by the Trump administration.
I would say it's something like that, yeah. Well, of course, global warming is a myth, so...
Yeah. This is, we have a trade war with you, and the way we're going to win it is by not competing with you.
Sounds like a good idea. We got a picture here coming up of a wind turbine.
A wind turbine, that's right. How did you guess?
I don't know. I haven't seen too many of them lately, but... And I might as well give you what the article says. Germany raises offshore wind power goal to 40 gigawatts in 20 years. Now, that's gigawatts.
This is big. This is really big. This is from Sour Energy, S-A-U-R Energy. And, Tom, I've been trying to figure out what that name is all about. Everybody who writes for this organization appears to be Indian. So I looked and I found, in fact, Sour Energy is in India, but I couldn't find out exactly why it was called that. There is an area of India called the Sour Valley. So I think that's probably the connection. Anyway, the synopsis on this is the German cabinet has passed a bill that would set a goal of 40 gigawatts of offshore wind power capacity installation by 2040, marking a surge of almost fivefold. It would increase capacity to 15 gigawatts by 2030. The German offshore wind capacity now is 7.5 gigawatts.
Well, they've got an opportunity, and we do have that opportunity here.
We sure do.
The Atlantic coast has that shelf there, which is it's just ideally set up for wind turbines.
It sure is, and it
goes
goes
out about 30 miles from shore, so you can't see them.
Yeah.
And I was reading about this. At first, the fishing industry was dead set against these things, and now they're finding out, hey, these things are attracting fish.
You know what you're reminding me of? I don't remember the name of the movie, but John Wayne was in a movie about offshore oil rigs in the Gulf.
Yeah.
And opposition that they got from the shrimping industry, and there was a turning point in the movie where he's talking to a shrimper, and he says, we've got a problem around these rigs. I wish you would help us. The water is just full of shrimp, and we can't get rid of them.
Such a problem.
Yeah, such a problem.
Well, as a quick takeaway here, the share of renewables in Germany reached 50% of the country's power capacity in 2018, and is expected to reach 70% by 2030.
Yes.
With non-hydro renewable energy expected to meet the country's future power demand after nuclear and coal is phased out. Yes,
and they are phasing out both of those. The coal is going faster than it was scheduled, which is happening elsewhere in the world.
Well, it's the economics, stupid.
Yes, I think it is. I think that's right. You got more on that, or should we go on?
Oh, we should move on.
Okay. We are still on Thursday, the 4th of June, and we've got an item coming up from CleanTechnica.
I'm trying to figure out what's going on in that picture there.
Well, the picture is, it looks to me like it's a picture of people putting in...
pipeline.
Well, signs saying there's a pipeline here, don't dig it here. I think the pipeline might already be in.
Yeah, something like that's happening.
But it's the picture that accompanied the article. So, yeah. Anyway, what do you got for a title?
Trump's EPA takes away state and tribal rights to protect their own water. Oh, why should they have their own rights to protect their own water?
What is that all about? The U.S. EPA has issued a rule that limits states and indigenous tribes' authority to protect the water within their own borders from federally authorized destructive projects such as oil and gas pipelines, hydropower dams, and wetland fills. And this is, I've mentioned this on this show a number of times. The first time I voted for president, it was 1968, and I voted for Richard Nixon, and I voted pretty much straight Republican from then until the election in 2000, and I stopped that I didn't do that in 2004. But I think I know something about what conservative values are. And in this particular case, the Trump administration's EPA is saying the states don't have the rights to protect their land. The people don't have the rights to protect their land. Indigenous tribes don't have the right to protect their land. And by land, I mean land, water, whatever. And that's taking states' rights away, which is exactly the opposite of the traditional conservative approach.
That is kind of interesting. Well, what's going on here, of course, is it's money.
It's money. The conservative approach has changed. It used to be pro-states' rights. It used to be don't throw money at a problem. It used to be don't pick winners and losers. And all of those things, all of the conservative values seem to be up in the air when it comes to a question of whether their supporters are taking an interest in the affairs of government.
Well, from the article, it says the move makes it easier for industry to rush proposals for things like oil and gas pipelines toward approval.
Yes.
And it goes on to editorialize exactly the opposite of what the EPA was formed to do.
Exactly the opposite, yes. And this was an organization which was put together, as a result of a law signed by Richard Nixon, wasn't it?
I couldn't tell you that.
I think it was.
I'll take your word for it.
Richard Nixon's work, and now the conservatives are saying, well, Richard Nixon was a socialist.
That's all about money.
It's all about money. Okay, should we go on? Or
yeah, I got an interesting picture here. What is that funny-looking thing?
That's an ammonia molecule.
Amazing.
Isn't it?
Well, what it says here is charting a course toward the ammonia economy. I think that's the first time I've heard that phrase. What does it mean?
Well, before I go into that, I should say we're up to Friday, June 5th, and this is an article from Monash Lens, which is really interesting. Monash is the great Australian military man from the First World War. Okay, now you asked a question, which was...
It's a really long article.
But it's really interesting.
It's a good article.
Yeah. Let me read the synopsis. Most people have heard of the hydrogen economy, where renewable electricity creates hydrogen fuel from water, but an ammonia economy is emerging as a viable possibility. In the ammonia economy, ships, trucks, buses, power generators, and even jets could run on ammonia. This is something, Tom, that we've been talking about in the past on this show.
We have. Well, I just want to clarify one thing. Ammonia here is not the stuff that comes in a bottle you use to wash your floors.
Right.
That's ammonium hydroxide. That's ammonia dissolved in water.
That's right. And the smell
ammonia is a gas.
Yes, the smell that you get from that, the really pungent, powerful smell, that is ammonia gas.
Yep.
But it's pretty thinly distributed in the air to give you that smell. Ammonia is one of the really fascinating chemicals that we have. There's a lot going on with this, and it's like water. It's one of the hardest things in the world to heat up and cool off. But the interesting thing about it here is that those three white balls on the ends of the sticks coming out from the big blue ball in the middle, those are hydrogen. And the big blue ball in the middle is nitrogen. The little white balls are hydrogen, and you can separate those with an electric current and a fuel cell membrane. And when you do that, you get hydrogen, which you can use. Now, the thing that makes this particularly interesting is that ammonia is easy to turn into a liquid, and you don't have to cool it off a lot or put a lot of pressure on it to maintain it as a liquid. And that means that you can maintain a lot of it in a small space compared to what you do with hydrogen, because you can liquefy hydrogen, but
very difficult to store it, though.
You don't want to put liquefied hydrogen into a car. Liquid hydrogen is going to be so close to absolute zero that it would be, and it would be really frightening what would happen if a container of that broke up. Ammonia, if a container broke up, would also be frightening, but not like hydrogen. And what this is doing is it's saying we've got an alternate course to running these things on fuel. And I think a really good example, we've seen a lot of airplanes, pictures of them on this show that are battery powered. And I think, was it last week, Tom, that we saw one that was a 9-passenger airplane?
I think it was more than 9.
Well,
it was a good-sized plane, really.
Not much more than 9, though. It was a single-engine plane.
Yeah.
And a plane like that is not going to take 400 people across the ocean. And the amount of...
This is great for regional work, though.
Yeah, but in this case, we're talking about a fuel that I believe you could use to take an electric airplane and fly it from Boston to London or something like that. Because you'd be able to store a lot of fuel on the plane.
I hear what you're saying. Well, from the article, transporting ammonia by pipeline is well established.
Yes, it is.
Marine-generated carbon emissions are mandated to be cut in half by 2050, which means that all new ships must be carbon-free.
Yeah.
And there's only one answer.
Yes.
green ammonia made with renewable energy.
Yes. And that's...
Let's move along here. We got a funny-looking picture of an oil platform. What happened to that? Where is it?
I have no idea where that is or what happened. I actually spent time trying to research that picture. I couldn't find out who owns the copyright, who took the photo, where it was, how that happened, or anything like that. That's an oil... I think it's a drilling platform with the way that it's set up that had its foundation collapsed. And by the way, I want to mention something about copyrights. We're operating on a non-commercial basis, which means that we can use things without paying for them in terms of what we're allowed to put up for photographs and things like that. So, you know, I like to tell people who owns the copyright or who took the picture, if I can't do it, then I can't do it. That's an interesting picture.
It's an interesting picture. I'd like to know what happened.
Yeah, I would too.
What a disaster, really. You figured it made some headlines.
Well, one thing that I'm really glad of is there was no fire. It doesn't appear to be oil slick all over the water. It's just, you know, an accident that took place that probably cost many millions of dollars. This is an item that came from Recharge.
Energy transition could wipe $25 trillion off the value of fossil fuel reserves.
And now you know why they've got
that again. That's heavy.
Yeah. Now you know why they've got a picture of an oil drilling rig falling over. 2/3 of the value of the world's oil and gas reserves, totaling $25 trillion, could be wiped out as the energy transition disrupts the entire fossil fuel system with profound ramifications for financial markets and geopolitics, the Carbon Tracker report says. Now, do you have anything to say, Tom?
Yeah, well, what it's saying is cheaper renewable technologies, more aggressive government climate policies, and reduced demand due to the pandemic are leading to lower prices, reduced profit, and rising investment risk, which we've discussed, really.
We have indeed, and we're going to be seeing this again. This is a recurring theme that's been going on. It's not here that some...
It's not over.
It's not that some group of guys have got together and said, we're going to have renewable energy and let's destroy fossil fuels or anything like that. This is a matter of...
Economics.
It's economics. It's economic competition. And we'll see this again.
Well, from the article, and it ends up this way, really. This is a quote. We are witnessing the decline and fall of the fossil fuel economy.
Yes, and my anticipation on this is that in the next 2 years, it's going to be getting worse rapidly for fossil fuels.
I think you're right. I wouldn't bet against it.
Yeah.
Well, we got an interesting one here called Tesla, working on 12-person vans for the Boring Company. By the way, Tesla owns the Boring Company.
Well, yeah, and you know, this is we're going to see something. We're going to see more about this. There was an item, I think it was today, so it won't be in the news today on this show, but it will be next time. Tesla is now by market capitalization, which means you take the shares that are outstanding and you multiply them by their price, and you add that together, and you know what the company is worth on the stock market.
Right.
Tesla is now the #1 company in the world.
Is it really? Wow.
Isn't that amazing? It just, like yesterday or the day before, passed Toyota. Anyway, this is Tesla, and this is from CleanTechnica. The Boring Company reportedly approved to build an airport loop for the Ontario International Airport. Tesla said to be working with the Boring Company to produce 12-person electric vans for such routes. Presumably, they will be operating autonomously. And
I was fooled when I read this by Ontario. We're not talking about Canada. We're talking about California.
Yes.
And Ontario, California is right near L.A.
Yeah. Now, I want to point something out here. You know, people are put off by autonomous vehicles on the road. The Boring Company is not interested in road vehicles. The Boring Company is called the Boring Company because its job is to bore big holes in the ground. So these things are going to be done underground.
Oh, yeah. Well, basically they're talking about a new subway system.
A new subway system. And autonomously means that it operates without a driver. But that shouldn't put anybody off because people are accustomed to autonomous things that operate without drivers in
airports.
Well, I was going to say in elevators. Elevators operate without drivers. People are used to that.
Yeah, that's right.
They'll get used to these things really fast once they see them running, I think.
Well, the tunnel concept from boring looks cheaper and faster than any potential rail projects above the ground.
Yeah.
Go into that in detail. I'm not going to bother mentioning them, but it's a new subway connecting the airport to the town.
Yeah. Okay. We are up to Saturday, June 6th.
And we got a picture of Amsterdam, huh?
Amsterdam. And, I look at that picture and I say to myself, I wonder, that girl is smiling. I wonder if she's privately just a little bit nervous that guy is going to hose her down.
He's got quite a stream of water going there.
He does. I don't think I'd want to get hit by that stream of water. It would hurt. Anyway, this is from CNN.
Well, last month was the hottest May on record as the world creeps closer to a dangerous threshold.
Last month was the hottest May on record worldwide, a Copernicus Climate Change Service report said. Globally, May was 0.63 degrees Celsius above the average for 1981 to 2010, setting a record for the month. Now, this next sentence ties to something we were talking about last week. Siberia was 10 degrees Celsius, which is 18 degrees Fahrenheit, above normal. And we're going to get back to Siberia.
Well, there's an interesting video on this website called What Coronavirus Could Teach Us About the Climate Crisis. It's about 3 minutes.
Yeah, and it's worth watching.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
And what it says here for the article, this has been the hottest winter in the 140-year history of meteorological observations. The world is creeping dangerously close to a temperature that would be devastating to the planet.
And we're going to find out in a couple of our articles on the news here that are coming up about why a slight change in temperature can be devastating. And one of those articles is the next one.
Well, we mentioned something like this last week.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to mention it again after this.
Absolutely.
Today.
We did mention it last week. Here it is again. And we are going to mention it again. This is from the BBC, and we have a picture of a cleanup on a river in Siberia. Now, we were talking about Siberia just a minute ago. Now we're back to it.
And we'll be talking about it again. We got a map of it coming up.
Yes, we do.
Well, the Arctic Ocean oil spill, which the picturing is here, Russian prosecutors order checks at permafrost sites. And we'll probably cover that in the article a little bit later, but this is a big problem for Russia.
This is a big problem for the world, truth be told.
Really, it is.
Russian prosecutors have ordered checks at, quote, particularly dangerous installations, end quote, built on permafrost. About 20,000 tons of diesel oil leaked into a river in the Arctic. Initial inquiries suggest the tank collapsed because the permafrost that it had been built on melted.
This was a big spill. It contaminated 145 square miles.
Yeah.
That's like 12 by 12.
Yeah, and the river, of course, is taking it out beyond that. But the thing is, and this is something the Russians, and we've talked about this for, I think, at least a year, the Russians have a problem. And the problem is, even though the temperature of the global temperature is going up just a little bit, that little bit is enough to melt the permafrost. And the permafrost happens to be the bedrock for all kinds of things going on in Siberia, including whole...
It's the term bedrock. The permafrost is acting as bedrock, and it's melting.
And so here's the first big indication of that is that this tank collapsed. Well, I think a year ago we saw sinkholes in Siberia that were a couple of 100 meters across. By the way, Siberia is about 35% larger than the United States, so this is a big area.
Well, we'll see a map of that a little bit later on.
We will indeed. You got any more on this article, Tom, or should we go on to the next?
Well, it says, I'll give you one sentence. Foundations in permafrost regions can no longer support the loads they did as recently as the 1980s.
Which means
this is a big problem for Russia.
They can't support loads that have already been built on them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's happening in Canada. It's happening in Alaska.
Yeah, but not the way it is in Siberia.
Not the way it's happening in Russia.
Yeah. Okay, should we go on?
Yeah, we got one here that says a call on science to protect wetlands policy in a changing climate.
And we have a nice picture of wetlands.
It's kind of a pretty spot, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah. This is from The Hill. the Trump administration's dogged retreat from the use of science to inform sound public policy will reach another milestone on June 22nd, when the final regulations reducing the number of water bodies and wetlands protected by the Clean Water Act take effect. The EPA has changed how they're going to implement things, and they're just doing this, and it's going to happen days from now.
Well, there's something going on here with Trump and Obama. Trump seems to be bound and determined to overthrow anything that Obama did.
Yeah. It's because
and this Trump regulation replaces a rule developed during the Obama administration. Therefore, It's fair game.
I think that's correct, although they are attacking things that do go back to Richard Nixon. It's just one of those things. They have, I don't know. We've got other things to talk about than politics, and I could talk on and on and on about politics.
Well, let's move on.
We're up to Sunday, June 7th. We have a picture.
Life goes fast when you're having fun, right?
Yeah, right. We have a picture of a rooftop solar array with a guy standing in the middle of it.
More jobs in renewable-led COVID-19 economic recovery. EY report finds, and EY is Ernst & Young.
Right, and this is from ABC News, which is the Australian broadcast company. And the synopsis is, in Australia, a renewables-led economic recovery will create almost 3 times as many jobs as a fossil fuel-led recovery, a report from Ernst & Young says. The federal government, this is the federal government of Australia, has been favoring a gas-fired approach to COVID-19 recovery. And
this article turns that upside down.
Yes, it
argues replacing fossil fuels with renewables and hydrogen will be better for the economy and create 45,000 jobs. That's a good number of jobs.
Yeah, that's actually a very big job when you consider the number of people who live in Australia. It's it would be like creating 500,000 jobs in the United States.
Probably would, right? You're right. Let's move along here. We got one coming up. Says windy enough in Dust Bowl land.
And we've got a photograph of a wind farm called Colorado Green, and they're not talking about lettuce. And this is from Mountain Town News. I love getting these articles from small publications that are just way out in the field, and this is one of them.
They get picked up by the big guys, though.
Yeah, they do. Wind power developers have tried to build wind farms in southeastern Colorado in the past. They were unable to get the transmission lines they need to tie to the grid. Now they're trying again. Baca County, one of the least populated counties in the state, has a potential for 15 gigawatts of capacity.
I was reading the article. It's got quite a bit of wind potential there.
Oh, huge. Huge.
And they can't get it to market.
Well, they are trying. And
that's what this is about.
Yeah, and it looks like they might succeed this time.
If there's money to be made, eventually it's going to overpower everything else.
Yes, and 15 gigawatts is a lot of electricity.
Gigawatts is megawatts.
Right. Every hour you're talking about. Well, a megawatt is maybe, I'm going to say $50, a megawatt hour, rather. And what you're talking about is 15,000 times that amount every hour. Every hour that the capacity is at full use. Okay, so given wind power capacity, it might be 5,000 times that amount. But 5,000 times $50, you're starting, and that every hour. You're talking about a lot of money here.
Pretty soon you're up to the big bucks, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's like, who was it? The senator who said $1 billion here, $1 billion there. After a while, pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Yeah. I don't know who said it, but I do remember the quote.
I think it was Everett Dirksen. There's probably, there's a lot of people in the United States today who don't remember Everett Dirksen. But, that just shows our age. So now we're coming.
Here coming up, and it looks very much like the one on Western Avenue.
It does, doesn't it? This is actually a fairly old picture. And, every once in a while I go in looking for pictures because the Keene Sentinel didn't have a picture for this article that I liked. So I just went looking for a New Hampshire solar array. And this person, whoever it is, who took pictures using the name Say Cheese, has pictures from this region. So this is from the Keene Sentinel, and we're still on Sunday, June 7th. What do you got for a title, Tom?
net metered renewable power costs less.
Guess what? And by the way, the person who wrote this article is a member of the House of Representatives and a sponsor of this bill. In fact, I think he might have written the bill.
Uh-huh.
But what the blurb says is the New Hampshire House of Representatives is about to get back to work. One bill is House Bill 1218, which would spur investment in low-cost renewable power by net metering electric ratepayers. It will save money because the, quote, fuel, end quote, is free and the, quote, delivery, end quote, requires only local distribution wires. And that second part of that, I think, is really, really important.
So it's not a high line, it's just local transmission lines.
You don't have to build huge transmission lines that come down from someplace in Canada and go down to Boston or wherever to get this power to market. You just, in many cases, you just put the power on the grid. And of course,
we're talking about net metering here, and what that is in a nutshell is, if you're generating electricity, you can sell it.
Yeah, that's right.
If you got surplus, you can sell it, and the market determines the price.
Yep, you buy what you need when you need it, and you sell what you've got when you've got excess.
What the article says, a homeowner with solar panels pays the full retail rate for incoming utility power, but nothing for power from the roof that reduces that load. And if it makes more than it uses, it can sell any net energy back to the grid.
Yes.
So net metering makes sense.
Net metering also, contrary to what people who oppose it say, it actually reduces the power rates, which is what, for everybody, regardless of whether they're net metered or not, which is one of the things that this particular article is saying.
We got a nice picture of a barge sitting in a barge canal.
Yep.
I got a little story about a barge, which is kind of funny. In this particular picture, those two blue containers in the front of the barge are the batteries.
They sure are. They sure are. This article came from CleanTechnica. Do you want to read the title, or should I?
What it says, Watsilla, and, I apologize for the pronunciation, Anji, I know that one's right, and Ing Bank develop emissions-free barge business with interchangeable energy containers.
Yeah, Wärtsilä was joined by a number of other partners to form Zero Emission Services BV, that's the name of a company, to make inland waterway shipping more sustainable by providing interchangeable energy storage containers for barges powered by batteries. And, this is the barge equivalent of a container ship.
It really is. We don't have barges that big here in New York or in the New York State Barge Canal, which I will mention in a minute.
Yeah.
They have looks like they got a pretty sophisticated system there. One of the things there I noticed is this is a self-powered barge.
Yes.
Normally these things are pulled by tugboats.
They
used to be pulled by horses.
Yeah. I always thought of a barge as being something that was, by definition, not self-powered.
But they mentioned in the article that this is self-powered. I wouldn't be surprised if you wouldn't see something like large outboard motors on the very back of this barge.
Yeah, I think that what they've probably got is those jets that they have that
yeah, that would work.
Can be turned. So, for example, if they did, this barge could be steered sideways.
Well, there's not much room in a canal to steer it, but
yeah. And one thing that I wanted to mention about this thing, the packs there, the thing that says Z and pack on it, that's zero emission service pack. Those are the
batteries.
But in the front of this barge, where there's a big red star.
Yeah.
What that means. I wonder whether they don't have a bridge where they can control this barge in the front and then another one in the back.
Well, I was wondering exactly that, and I enlarged the picture and I looked at it. If you look in the front, there is a man standing there wearing a hard hat, but he is not doing anything because he'd be in some kind of a protective covering, a bridge or something.
Yeah.
But there is a structure in the back.
Yes, I can see that. Where
obviously the crew stays, and imagine what they're doing is they're looking in front of the bridge by television, in front of the barge. I mean.
That's a good point. They might do that.
They would have to do that. They'd have to have somebody up there. That guy up in the bow is not a lookout. He's not yelling back, hey, slow down, there's something coming up.
Yeah, on the other hand, maybe he's just eating his lunch.
That's more likely. Hey, I have an interesting story about a barge.
Tell us.
I mentioned that New York State has a barge canal which goes from New York from Albany to Buffalo.
From Albany to Buffalo.
I think there's a song about that, isn't it?
There is. I know the song. It's
and
called...
the E is arising and the gin is getting low.
Yeah. I don't remember that, but I do remember the song. It's called the Erie Canal Song.
Yes, that's part of it.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, I was driving. Sure, I'll go back a second here. The New York State Barge Canal going out to Glens Falls parallels Route 4.
Yeah.
So you can drive along Route 4 and see the barge traffic. And typically these barges are pulled by specialized tugboats.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm driving along one day, and I see this barge, not a barge, I see this tugboat cruising down the barge canal. He's doing a good speed. He's keeping up with me. And I look ahead, and I see that there's a bridge across the canal. I say, this guy's going to crack right into that bridge. I got to see this. So I'm watching this thing, and like I say, this guy's going at a pretty good clip. As he approaches the bridge, the entire barge, or the entire bridge of the barge, drops. It goes underneath the bridge, and it pops up again. You could have knocked me over with a feather.
Oh, man. Who'd have thought?
Who'd have thought? Yeah. But it was interesting, so I learned something.
Yeah.
Well,
you remind me of a day when my electricity at home went out. This is when I was living down on the South Shore in Massachusetts. And going to work that morning, I found out why. It was because a truck, which was a dump truck, had been driving with the dump up and tried to go under an underpass with the dump up.
Oops. It doesn't work well, does it?
Well, the guy who was driving that might have been hurt really badly. But
could have been, yeah.
One of the things that he did was he opened up all the utility lines that went through the concrete in that overpass. And, your story about the barge canal is really funny. Should we go on, Tom?
Yeah, I think we should.
We have an item here from PV Magazine Australia about a company called Fluence. And we have a picture of a battery storage. It's really a pretty dull picture.
Pretty good-sized battery storage.
It is. But it's not all it is.
That's the coming thing. I mean, we're going to be talking about that again in this.
We will. And again and again. What do you got for a title? Maybe you shouldn't read this title. It's too confusing.
I'll read it anyhow. You can unconfuse me.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Fluence proposes a 500-megawatt BESS case scenario to VNI West RIT T. It's a little bit confusing. Well,
RITT.
BESS is a battery electric storage system.
Yes. Submissions are in on the Victoria New South Wales Interconnector West, which is the VNI West RITT. One proposal by Fluence, which is a company, is to replace the traditional infrastructure with mega-scale battery energy storage systems as virtual transmission. Fluence
Interesting point.
Huh?
Interesting point. Virtual transmission.
Virtual transmission. Who'd ever thought of such a thing? Fluence says the system can be deployed very quickly. And, one of the things that people should bear in mind here is transmission lines are not cheap. They're,
as a matter of fact, quite expensive.
They're huge.
It's all that real estate that you got to deal with.
Yeah, I talked a couple of years ago. I did an interview for Green Energy Times with a company that was trying to get somebody in Arabia interested in battery storage, and the point that they were making was if you want to move power at 500 megawatts, you're going to have a lot of cables, and those cables are going to be, in this case, I think they were 100 miles long or something. And he said if they put in batteries, and instead of running that while solar is available, run it full time, it turns out to be cheaper. Cheaper to buy the infrastructure for that, so that the batteries supply 24/7 power instead of supplying the full load in the middle of the day.
Well, this article is interesting because in southern Australia, southeastern Australia, there's two states there, New South Wales and Victoria.
Yeah.
Both densely populated.
Yeah.
And what they're doing here is they're building two large battery storage capabilities, one in each state.
Yes.
And they're working them in tandem, so one is charging while the other one's discharging.
Yeah.
And they're about 50 miles apart. They're pretty good-sized stations, and they're working them all together. It makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
They call it operating in tandem.
Yep. And I think that's something that could be expanded to have a lot more different places.
Well, everything's changing in the way we distribute electricity, and there's going to be a lot of innovations that are going to be popping up, and some of them are going to work, and some of them aren't.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that all develops.
Well, for sure, we're going to see a big difference in the way we deal with the grid.
Yeah. Okay. Our next item is the last one for Monday, June 8th, and it is from Renews.
Now, I call this naval, but I'll call it Naval. No, it's a company. Naval Energies joins Offshore Wind California Group.
The French company Naval Energies and trade association Offshore Wind California joined to pursue deployment of floating wind technology. California has excellent wind resources, with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory estimating the state's technical capacity at 112 gigawatts.
Well, a gigawatt is a bigawatt, baby.
Right. And if you think about, how that comes as wind versus what it would be if it were nuclear reactors, I would say that this offshore wind, is probably the equivalent of 65 or 70 nuclear reactors.
Something like that. The math comes out to that.
Yeah, wind doesn't have a capacity factor that's as high as nuclear. And
they have to.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about these here is they're floating.
Yeah.
And the reason they're floating is there's really a very small continental shelf off of California.
I think you could say none, and it would be...
Virtually none.
Yeah.
Yeah. These things have to float, but they're tethered.
Yes.
They don't go anywhere, but they bounce around a little bit.
Bounce around. There you go. One thing about this is California has a very long coast, and so this would be...
Tremendous potential.
Yeah, this would be stretched out over a very long distance. And one thing that people should be aware of here is, people say the wind doesn't always blow. Well, that's not exactly true. The wind always blows somewhere.
It blows in different places.
And in the California coast, there's always going to be some part of that coastline.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's, what, 1,000 miles?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Okay, we're up to Tuesday, June 9th, and we have a mistaken identity here.
Well, it's no big deal, but it's the world's largest renewable hydrogen plant, Part 2.
Yep.
And we talked about Part 1 last week.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the mistaken identity is this is in Lancaster, California, not Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
And the picture is the picture of President James Buchanan's home in Lancaster,
Pennsylvania,
which is a little distant from his what it would have been if it had been in Lancaster, California. And I'm sorry about that.
PA is where the Pennsylvania Dutch hang out.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, this is from CleanTechnica, and the article that we're interested in says, and this is a fascinating article. The city of Lancaster, California, has a hydrogen project that is rocket science. One thing easy to understand about it is that science makes it possible to produce hydrogen from waste paper.
That's interesting.
Yep, on cost parity with the fossil fuel-based gray hydrogen with a negative carbon impact. And, I have to point out, this is shredded paper, it's waste paper, but it's not being recycled. What had to happen in the past, before we got into a trade war with China, was that it was being...
Chinese were doing it.
They were taking it in China, and the Chinese said, well, we're not going to take your waste paper anymore. So we've been having this stuff build up and build up and build up, and now here's a company that says, okay, we can take that waste paper and turn it into hydrogen, and it actually draws down carbon. But the thing is, this is done by using what's called plasma. They have to heat everything up to about 4,000 degrees Celsius. And I got to tell you...
These things really new technology.
Yeah. 4,000 degrees Celsius, I'm sorry, that's not something you even want to look at because it would hurt your eyes to see it and from a distance. And, that's really, 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 really bright. But what happens with the plasma is the molecules simply dissociate. So you don't have molecules. If you have dioxin going in there, it's going to dissociate into its constituent parts, which would be oxygen, carbon, chlorine, and so forth. But in this case, what's happening is they are getting hydrogen to dissociate from the paper, and the carbon is falling away as carbon.
So they're discovering new ground here.
Yes, I think they are. I think that's fair. And, green hydrogen has in the past been very expensive compared to what they call gray hydrogen, which is mostly made from natural gas. But in the future, they're going to have this green hydrogen, and why anybody would make gray hydrogen, I don't know. I mean, waste paper if you can't ship it to China, what are you going to do with it?
This is as good as anything.
This is one of those situations where a person might be paid to take it away. You know?
It's close to that.
Kind of like oil.
Let's move along here. We got some offshore turbines coming up. Isn't that funny? We talk about offshore turbines.
Yeah, I thought they were party noisemakers. This is from Renews, and they don't make as much noise as a noisemaker, so I shouldn't have said that.
Offshore wind offers 1.4 terawatt potential by 2050. 1.4 terawatts, baby. That's all. That's more than gigawatts.
Well, it's 1,400 gigawatts, and as we know, a gigawatt is a bigawatt.
Absolutely.
If you're talking about offshore wind here, even if you allow that wind has got half the capacity factor of nuclear, this would mean 1,400 plus. I don't know how much plus, but over 1,400 Vermont Yankee nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
And let me read the synopsis. Up to 1,400 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity could be built around the world by the year 2050, according to the Ocean Renewable Energy Action Coalition. It said 1,400 gigawatts is achievable considering the resource potential, technology innovation, and government appetite to focus on offshore wind power.
I don't think the whole world uses 1,400 gigawatts.
Oh, I think it probably does. Yeah, I don't know.
The article here. Let me say it because it says a lot.
Okay.
Offshore wind has become an incredibly competitive solution for clean power generation across the world.
Yes.
With impressive cost reduction driving the industry's growth by over 30% in the past decade, and now outcompeting alternative fuels such as coal. It is estimated that offshore wind could provide about 24 million man-years of employment.
I don't know anybody who's lived that long. Yeah, there you go. Okay, is that it for this article?
Not it for now. Yeah, we got a nice picture of the Soviet Union. There is no more of Russia. Yeah,
this is a map, and the black line running through that, kind of hither and yon, is the Russian border, and
the other black line is the one that's made by all those pictures of derricks there.
Yeah.
And that's what this story is really all about.
If you look at the lower right corner of that map, you can see Japan there. It's kind of hard to see these because they're it's white land in a light blue sea. But there's Japan in the lower right, and Italy is in the lower left. And why don't you read the title?
Russia's fossil fuel infrastructure. Well, that's the title of the
picture.
The picture. Melting permafrost claims its first victim. Russia's oil and gas network. This could be very significant.
It could be very significant, not just for Russia, but for us.
Definitely for Russia, and for us too.
Yeah, this is from CleanTechnica. This past week, there was an oil spill in Siberia because of melting permafrost. Now, we talked about that earlier in this show, and we talked about it last
week.
But, here we are with this same thing rearing its head again. Almost all of Russia's oil and gas fields are under permafrost, and much of the pipeline system goes over permafrost. Russia's planned pipelines to China are especially at risk. Well, with the oil fields under permafrost, that means the oil rigs, the pumping materials, the storage tanks, all of that stuff is built using ice as a foundation.
Absolutely. What I was just going to say, the permafrost used to be as good a foundation as concrete.
Yes.
But it's melting.
It's melting. Oh, man.
And melting permafrost can lead to the total collapse of Russia's oil network.
Yeah, and Russia's oil network, oil and gas, provides it with 65% of its income from foreign trade.
So this could destroy its economy.
It could be really devastating. And that's probably not a good thing.
I don't see how it helps us at all.
When things get tight for countries like Russia, it can have impacts around the world. But Russia is right now the second biggest exporter of oil in the world.
After the U.S.
After the U.S. And
that isn't going to last forever in the U.S.
It's not going to last forever in the U.S. And here we're seeing how we could see Russia's oil infrastructure literally collapse in a very few number of years, a very small number of years. And this is not good. It's dangerous.
It would have worldwide repercussions.
It would. It is dangerous in the sense that it's politically dangerous, it's economically dangerous. From the point of view of the environment, it could be really bad because you'd be spilling oil over areas that are already susceptible to wildfires. On the other hand, what its effect is going to be on climate change, I don't know.
Well, for what it's worth, in Siberia right now, there is a lot of wildfires.
Yes, I know. And, one way we could deal with that would be to just say we're not going to use oil anymore. And don't pump that oil, leave it in the ground.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
What would Exxon say about that?
I don't know. They'd probably say, well, we've got an 80-year supply, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Let's move along here.
Yeah, we're up to Wednesday, June 10th, the last day of our week.
A nice picture of a solar technician at work.
Yeah, it's courtesy of Duke Energy, which is installing a lot of solar power these days.
Yeah, they are. Well, 90% clean energy grid by 2035 is not just feasible, but cheaper.
Yeah, this is from Green Tech Media. It will be feasible to power the United States on 90% clean energy by 2035, thanks to stunning renewable cost declines, a study finds. Researchers from UC Berkeley and GridLab found that by 2035, renewables could power 90% of a reliable grid with just 10% from natural gas. And I don't think they're using the word renewables, I think, a little bit loosely there, because in the previous...
They include nuclear.
Yeah, I think they're actually including nuclear in that amount. But on the other hand, 2035, I think it's possible that we could see virtually no natural gas by 2035. It just depends on how things go. But natural gas...
I would bet with you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't bet against it.
Yeah.
Well, this particular scenario retires all the coal plants by 2035 and does not require any new construction of gas plants.
That's a very good point. So...
It means that, well, the latter part means Americans won't have to pay for new gas peaking plants that only run a few times a year, which are very expensive.
They're very expensive. The electricity from them is... As a class, I think it's the most expensive electricity we buy is from natural.
Well, with the batteries that we've already seen in this episode here, they don't need peaking plants anymore.
I think that's absolutely correct, and it's one of those things that is probably worth mentioning more than once. So I think it's worth mentioning again.
Oh, we got a nice picture coming up here
of
a sky
wind farm.
Huh?
A wind farm.
It's
although
a wind
you can't tell whether it's dawn or dusk.
Whatever it is, it's a pretty picture.
Next week we're going to have a picture like this with the sun rising, and it's rising over a bunch of solar panels, and the solar panels are pointing almost exactly away from it.
That's interesting.
Well, I think it might have been. It doesn't look photoshopped, but I think it might have been very well photoshopped by somebody who did it very well, except he didn't understand what was happening there. But anyway, this is an item with the sun rising or setting on a field of wind turbines, and it's from the Irish Tech News.
They don't have any fields of wind turbines like that in Ireland.
You don't think so? I think you're probably right, Tom.
They do have wind turbines. As a matter of fact, you'll be driving along in Ireland, and you'll come by a farm, and they've got one giant wind turbine right in the field. Strange.
Which supports them, provides them with an income.
That's exactly what it is, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you have for a title?
Renewable energy market being boosted by blockchain technology.
Yeah, well, blockchain technology promises to help boost the greater use of renewable energy sources due to its ability to trace the production of green, sustainable energy. This will prove to be vital for peer-to-peer electricity trading and to track examination of carbon neutrality. And blockchain is a computer technology that was developed to create records of transactions that cannot be...
Permanent records, yep.
They cannot be altered. And the technique that they use, aside from encryption and things like that, which are kind of standard things, and there's usually ways to break encrypted files, but in this particular case, the encryption technique is not anywhere near as important as the fact that it's when that record is created, copies of it are circulated all over the place. So in order to...
Everywhere. Thousands of them.
Yeah, in order to alter the record, you'd have to find every place it was put and alter it there. And that is regarded as being practically impossible.
Yep.
So, and peer-to-peer, what they're saying is if we had blockchain technology installed, I could be producing solar power in Brattleboro, and you could be producing wind power in Guilford, and somebody else could be
automatically.
Yeah, it could be stored someplace in Putney, and we just put these things on the transmission lines and say that we've done it and don't worry about it.
It would all be done by a laptop.
It would be done by a laptop, and the bills would come, or the payments would come, or whatever as they are needed. So
let's move along here. We got something a little bit more local coming up.
We do, and this is from Biomass Magazine. It's our last item of the week.
And this is a picture of a hydroelectric dam very close to here in Lowell, Mass.
That's right.
You know it was there, right at Route 2.
Cute little dam, if a dam can be cute.
Well, a growth in renewable power is expected to continue. Duh.
Well, this is the EIA, which is the Energy Information Administration, which was created to tell the Congress what the situation with energy was, and their projections about renewable energy over the years have just proven to be wildly wrong year after year after year, but they're trying to get it straight. Renewable energy sources are expected to provide 21% of U.S. electricity in 2020, that's this year, and 23% in 2021, up from 17% in 2019. Data from the Energy Information Administration's latest short-term energy outlook shows. Natural gas is expected to provide 41% of U.S. electricity this year, but only 36% in 2021. And I just thought that was a fascinating figure that they're giving, because 36%, dropping from 41% to 36%, well, that's dropping 5% of the total amount of electricity that's out there, but that is a drop of about 12% in terms of the amount of electricity that the natural gas is actually providing.
A more accurate way of looking at it.
Yeah, and that what is it saying? It's saying you've got the natural gas industry, which is in trouble right now, producing a certain amount of electricity this year, but next year the prices of natural gas will go up, the cost of the electricity will go up, and they will lose market share because of competition. So they're between the rock and the hard place here. This is not good for natural gas.
I don't think so.
Right. I don't think
so. There's the article here where they give power source comparisons, coal versus nuclear versus biomass. And then they go into biomass in quite a bit of detail, but it's Biomass Magazine.
Yes, it's Biomass Magazine, and they do go into biomass in detail. And one thing that I should mention, by the way, is biomass does not necessarily mean cutting down trees and burning them. There's many different...
Only one kind of biomass.
Yeah, there's many different...
You have cow power in your house, right?
That's right.
That's biomass.
And I don't even have to look at the cows.
Or smell them, huh?
Well, if they're fed good material, it doesn't smell bad. It's when you start getting stuff that's been, silage that's been fermented, then it can start smelling pretty bad.
I believe it.
I went to a farm a couple of years ago, and I said to the woman who ran it, I said, this farm really smells nice. And she said, yeah. But it's a sweet smell from the cattle who are allowed to go out in the pastures. And it's the smell that used to kind of drift across the countryside in New England when I was a kid. But anyway, there we are. We are at the end of the week.
I think we are.
The final slide says have a lovely week. But really what I should have done was put one up that said have a profoundly mirthful week.
Profoundly mirthful. Huh?
Well, I like oxymorons. And for anybody who doesn't know what an oxymoron is, oxy, it comes from a Greek root meaning sharp, and moron comes from a Greek root meaning foolish. So this an oxymoron is sharp, foolish.
Like a wise fool.
Like a wise fool, possibly. I had a friend who used to have a bumper sticker that said I was an oxymoron because he was in Army security, in the Army Security Agency doing intelligence.
Interesting.
And the idea of Army intelligence or military intelligence was an
oxymoron, isn't it?
And if you asked him about oxymorons, he would always give the example jumbo shrimp.
Yep.
But profoundly mirthful is, I think, an oxymoron. So I hope everybody has a lovely week, a profoundly mirthful week, and that everybody comes back. You want to say goodbye, Tom?
Adios, everybody. See you.
Got any special messages?
Not that I can think of.
Well, I'm going to say goodbye, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are.
Who used to say that?
Jimmy Durante.
Yeah, Jimmy Durante.
He was the man who had the nose that knows.
The schnoz.
The schnoz, that's right. See you all later.
Adios.
Bye-bye.